if I recall correctly, Bardon states the need of the Godhead to work with the two-letter keys. How this comes to be. Now, I don't know. Can anyone comment on this?
Well, okay, I guess I'll take a swing. Generally speaking, you need to have worked through the first letter key before you do the multi-letter keys. For the most part, that means you're going to be invoking the letters at an Akashic level. So, you can reason through it that way. Because the two-letter combinations, if performed mechanically, which is how I recommend doing it, you take two distinct energies, like say you're doing the EN letter formula. Okay. You do the letter E, then you do the letter N, then you do the letter E, then you do the letter N. And you keep doing that until they fuse into this other thing. And that becomes that. So that's one way of looking at it. I'm sure, everybody here who has experience with this can have another view on it. But for the most part, you don't want to engaging the multi-letter keys until you've at least worked through the single letter key. That would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to comment?
If we look at what Bardon writes, and I would agree with this, he clearly explains that once you have done all this work with the single letter key, there is a degree of automaticity, if you'll pardon that kind of, I don't know if that's a real word. There's a degree of automatic activation, kind of. It's not exactly like that. When you use formula, you still have to, be aware of the physical, astral, mental bodies. You still have to, depending on the level that you're working at. Let's say it's an astral level. You still have to have an image. You still have to have the color, the sonics, the fundamental spiritual principle running. But he doesn't. I don't think he talks about having the Godhead state as a necessity. I could probably go and get the book and find the bit where he says this, because and the reason I focus on this is because I actually went through the single letter key, thought I had achieved it, but had not, and I got some extra training from Ray, and things improved. But I basically redid the whole of the single letter key, and I did find this kind of, it's not completely automatic, but there is a degree of activation that just kind of springs up in the multiple letter formulae when you've really done your homework on the single letter key first. And then there, of course, Bob is absolutely correct. You have to get the single letter key done properly. And my experience, only having failed on the first attempt of doing that, only goes to emphasize how correct Bob is when he pointed that out. But in terms of the question, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do the Godhead, as in the end of initiation into Hermetics, and the necessity for the Godhead for evocation in practice of magical evocation. I don't think for formally, so by all means, people, please do shoot me down if you disagree, but I don't think it's an absolute essential. And particularly if you bear in mind all the other stuff you've got running. For example, with a 4-letter key, you're going to have all the senses, the alignment of the physical, astral, mental. You're going to have the spiritual principles of each letter, the mental, astral. You're going to have images. The image may even morph as you do the formula with the colors of each letter as you add that to the image. And then there's going to be an elemental mix. If you can fit the Godhead in there as well, nice one. but you need to get it really nice and tight what you're doing, and as I say, the necessity therefore is to have fully realized the single letter key, really properly, gone through that, so that there's absolutely no shadow of a doubt that you have done that work. And then what follows is a momentum, or some kind of semi-automatic tendency, or it's very hard to explain, but that then is elicited when you do multiple formulae, and things seem to just sort of naturally lock in quite readily. And for that reason, I say that the Godhead is not essential for 2, 3, and 4 letter keys. That's my view.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to jump in on this? Victoria.
I'll just give a little bit of my own perspective. If the state of the Godhead is not needed for working with 2-letter keys or 3 or 4, it kind of highlighted for me there's different degrees of quality and quantity and manifestation with any type of magic we do. It depend on the source we're pulling it from, our own vessels and vehicles. So I would take this as something to experiment with if you get to or are at that level of doing 2-letter keys, to try to get into your own Godhead and then speak the 2-letter keys. I'm surmising there might be a mechanism, because I think the 2-letter keys are working on different levels of reality and having more kind of fuse input than just a single letter, that if you do it from the state of the Godhead mechanically, that might have a different kind of charge than if you weren't doing that. So kind of rather than at a flatline interpretation, I would say, why don't you see this as maybe a challenge to do for yourself, and to see how operating Kabbalah from the Godhead might change the outcome of your Kabbalah work.
May I offer a thought experiment? Is that okay?
Please.
Okay. You see, when I went through the single letter key the first time and falsely believed that I had completed it, what I was doing with the multiple letter keys was I was doing the Godhead, and I was getting an output. Now the thing is, I realized that because I was doing the Godhead, I could get an output with anything, runes, ogam, because it was the Godhead that was producing the output, not the letters. This is my belief now, and like I say, I'm perfectly happy to be wrong about it, but it's how I see it. And like I say, that what you need is for there to be a semi-automatic kind of activation of these letters, such that obviously if you do the Godhead with them, this is good, but you it is not an essential thing, because you have been so thorough with the single letter formulae, and because you've been absolutely thorough and solid with the single letter formulae, there is this almost, well, there's not almost, it is a semi-automatic activation, as long as you frame the sonics, the sounds, the elements, the tone, the color correctly. There's this activation that occurs. And when I went through the single letter key the first time and didn't get it properly done, the only way I was getting that activation was because I was doing the Godhead with it. And when I then went through the single letter key again and really hammered it properly into shape, yes, the Godhead will be good, but there's this tendency towards activation, whether the Godhead is being expressed or not, and that's what I have found. So I could use I don't know, Greek letters or Coptic letters or whatever, or Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I could do the Godhead, and I can start to get a result. But that kind of me is kind of it's more like, to me, the kind of thing I would have done in the past in a ritual magic, rather than the distinctive Kabbalah that Bardon expresses. So what I'm saying is it's not incorrect to employ the Godhead. What I'm saying is that you can get an out if you are really solid with a single letter key, you can get an output even if for some reason it's not appropriate to use the Godhead on that particular formula. That may sound a little paradoxical, but that is what I respectfully put forward.